Recently, I have talked about Johto and why its post-game is actually very depressing, and it's left me with the usual nostalgia for the Gen 2 region. I took a stroll down memory lane, listened to a few of the tracks from Gen 2, National Park is my favorite, and also looked into what mysteries do we still have about that region. So hey, I'm Not So Ace Trainer, welcome back to the channel, and today we're talking about the Unown and why Game Freak needs to do something more with them. Let's get into it. Before we begin, and to understand the need and reasoning behind what I'll propose, we will need to know what the Unown are and what their purpose is. The Unown are mysterious Pokemon that can be one of 28 forms, from A to Z plus question mark and exclamation mark. They were introduced in the Gen 2 games and have, ever since the late 90s, been the starting point for many theories. They are almost always tied exclusively to some kind of ruin in the Pokemon world, so always tied to ancient history. Except in Hoenn, where they show up in the Mirage Cave that you find when soaring in the Gen 3 remakes. When you find them or catch them, they'll only know and only ever will know the move Hidden Power, which is already a bit of a mystery and almost hints at there being some more power to them. These Pokemon are also caught exclusively in the Japanese-inspired regions, at least so far. This is very interesting, especially since we know they were used for communication despite there being a debate on whether they came first or the language itself. Since we found a different form of ancient writing system back in the abyssal ruins in the Unova region and no actual Pokemon that look like those characters, we could say that the Unown came after the system and imitated it. But I'd argue that they actually came before the writing system had been developed, possibly as a way for Arceus to communicate with humans. But that is a story for another time, and the important point right now is that they are mysterious, and that is very good. We love mysterious, lore-heavy Pokemon, but their purpose and lore hasn't really been explored to the fullest, and certainly hasn't been explored in a long time. And exploring lore doesn't really mean completely unveiling the lore. That is not a good thing. It just means adding little bits of extra information here and there, kind of like the fun thing that AZ did, building not only one weapon but actually two weapons. At this point in the Unown's lore or purpose, Game Freak has explored only a few things. The ruins of Alph in Johto, where we first saw this Pokemon, are certainly very interesting. But as incredibly popular videos have already discussed, there is no mystery and the point is to be mysterious. A very expected and confusing answer. We learn a few things through the messages that we find there in the ruins of Alph, that they don't like a lot of people and have the power to sense with their minds. But that doesn't really develop the Unown a lot. We know that they are Pokemon that like to isolate themselves, hence the ruins, and we also know that from their psychic type they likely had some form of mind power or the ability to sense something. In the Tanobi ruins that we visited in the Gen 1 remakes, we don't learn a lot, except that this Pokemon can, in a way, be tied to something that is loosely connected to the Kanto region. In Gen 4 though, the Solacean ruins actually develop things a little bit more, and give us a general idea behind the Unown. There we find the following message: all lives touch other lives to create something anew and alive. This makes things about this Pokemon a little clearer. Communication brings people together. The more we talk to each other, the more we realize that we actually have more in common than we originally believed. And so, in Johto, the Unown made communication easier. In Kanto, they don't really tell us a lot, of course, but if someone from the general area of the Tanobi ruins or the Sevi Islands met with someone from the general area of the ruins of Alph, they would be able to communicate with each other through the Unown. And the same would happen if they met someone from the general area of the Solacean ruins. 3 different people from 3 very distinct places able to talk to each other because of this Pokemon. And it actually happened. The biggest development in the lore and purpose of the Unown was when in the Gen 2 remakes we learned about the Sinjo ruins, which I theorize are somewhere near the land of Kitakami, link in the description. These ruins were created by people from Sinnoh, Hisui at the time, and Johto. As we know, Sinnoh was the name for Arceus, so maybe Johto was the name for it as well, or for the Unown. Video on this in the future. The important part is that they came together. And they came together because they understood each other. And they understood each other because of the Unown. There, they built an altar for Arceus, the mystery stage, a place where we witness the alpha Pokémon and the Unown together creating a god, basically, either Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina. It is not known what the role of the Unown in that situation was, but considering that we see a very weird cutscene during the event and the Unown are there for communication, maybe they are there so our brains don't fry during the event, so we can comprehend at least a little of what we're witnessing. But that's kinda where it stops. I thought we'd see a lot more of the Unown in Pokémon Legends Arceus, but I was honestly and very sadly wrong. The side quest was cool, trying to find them all and all that, but in terms of actual juice, those games basically ignored the relation between the Unown and Arceus, despite even mentioning Sinjo for the first time since 2009. Not to mention, I was a bit disappointed there were no Unown in Kitakami, another Japanese-inspired region or land. But those are old wounds, and we're here to talk about the future. And so, considering everything we just talked about, what do I propose? Well, like probably one of the titles indicated, an evolution. But not just any kind of evolution. The Unown, as we've seen so far, seem to be connected to bringing different people together. They enable communication, allow people to form words and then sentences and use those to convey emotion or need or anything else really. Because of this, and because if there's one thing that has been true since they were introduced in Gen 2 is that the Pokédex entries often reference how one is weak but together they are strong, I believe a fusion evolution would be the way to move with this Pokémon. Fusion evolution is also a topic I have recently explored in the video if you want to check it out. But in the case of the Unown, it wouldn't just be any kind of fusion, but one that involved the core of their existence, the spelling or writing of a word. In fact, we could have many different words that led into different evolutions, maybe one for each Pokémon stat, sorta like how the Oxys has its different forms. There could be a region with some sort of altar in some newly found ruins of ancient times that made the whole thing possible by placing the right Unown in the right order. This would have the community scrambling to find the right answers, especially now that the Switch 2 cannot be hacked, so the games cannot be data mined. It's also great that these Pokémon, when present in the game, are far from rare despite only being in one place, meaning that quote-unquote sacrificing a few in order for them to evolve would not be a big issue. And there would be an added goal to find the right letters, not just to complete the usual Unown dex, but also to be able to evolve it into its different evolutions. I mean, imagine shiny hunting all the letters for a specific evolution in order to get the shiny evolution. That would be pretty awesome. This would add a new layer to the lore of the Unown, using what we already know about them as the base, and honestly not revealing too much about them, keeping them, in my opinion, an even bigger mystery. If we ever get another Johto game in the future, this is 100% what I would do with the Unown. And even if they don't do this, I think Game Freak really needs to do something about them, because they are one of the most interesting things about Gen 2, and dare I say it, the whole franchise. But what about you? Would you like to see the Unown evolving? Let me know in the comments down below. And now, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one. But before I go, I want to thank my YouTube members Good Old Deo, Dash Plays, The Gavanator, and Attila Santo, and my Twitch subscribers and newbies here, the Dr. Joe, Teixeira23, Lazarix, and Odd Cypher for going the extra mile. Thank you so much for all of your support.